Welcome, everybody. Welcome to the new MDs, moms, doctors, and scientists working together to heal our children. My name is Zen Honeycutt. I am very happy to be one of the panel members of this amazing show. I am the author of Unstoppable: Transforming Sickness and Struggle into Triumph, Empowerment, and a Celebration of Community. And I am joined by none other than Dr. Michelle Perro. She is the host of the show at gmoscience.org. And her book is What's Making Our Children Sick. And Dr. Michelle Perro has over 40 years as a pediatrician and has another book on the way called Making Our Children Well. Welcome, Dr. Michelle Perro.
Lovely to be here.
And also we're joined by Stephanie Seneff, PhD, MIT senior scientist, and also the author of one of my favorite books called Toxic Legacy: How the Weed Killer Glyphosate is Destroying Our Health and the Environment. Welcome, Stephanie.
Great to be here. Thanks, Zen.
Thank you so much for coming together and collaborating for this very important show. Today's show is the impact, addressing the impact of extreme weather on health. And also, we're going to be having a conversation regarding the potential causes of extreme weather. And this cause is going to be one that I would assert that no one has been discussing anywhere else. So please stay tuned for that as we dive into this show. So I'm just going to be checking in here. Do we have images of my personal experience, or am I showing them? Sorry, I'm conversing with the person right now. Okay. Well, I'm going to, let's see, present, I'm going to show then. So my background is, where I live is actually in Asheville, North Carolina. So I have personal experience with the most recent extreme weather, and I'm going to present. Okay, here we go. 1 second, sorry. One second. Can you guys see this now?
No.
I'm sorry for the snafu, everybody. I have let's see if we could just have some communication in the private chat, whether or not I'm showing these images. Or
And do you need to do something?
I'm sorry.
Shoot.
Well, Zen, you can certainly talk about your experience while we're getting these images up. Your description is powerful as any images we're going to show.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you. I'm so sorry that I didn't have clarification whether that was going to be ready or not. But so I live in Asheville, North Carolina, and the time of the extreme weather, Hurricane Helene, that happened recently, we had no warning that it was going to be this bad. We had a warning, possibly 10 inches, that there would be flooding, that there would be high winds, but we didn't have any type of warning that it would be this bad. In the evening, there were areas such as Black Mountain and Swannanoa that had some warning to evacuate. But it was not something that was, made very prevalent to people. So some people only had 30 minutes. I have, let me see. Let's see. I just wanted to be able to share my images. So hang on a second. Okay. Stop sharing the other screen. Okay. Sorry. Okay. Thank you. If you can show any of my images, that would be great. Okay. So, in Asheville, the amount of rain that fell overnight was 41 trillion gallons of rain. It would fill 51,000 Dallas Cowboys stadiums. And the winds were over 140 miles per hour. And no one expected the hurricane to be this ferocious a couple hundred miles in from the coast. So I fortunately live about 1,500 feet away from the French Broad River. So my house was fine. And for us, it was 3.5 days of total blackout, no cell phone use, no internet. Even our landline that was supposed to be a landline did not work. I believe that's because it's hooked up to the internet and not copper cables, which I would assert should still be, available everywhere. And after 3.5 days, after 3.5 days of the hurricane and all the power outages happening, AT&T and Spectrum and T-Mobile and all that finally decided to allow the use of, like, they unlocked their cell phone codes. So we were then able to get data and at least text people and tell people we were alive. And when we went up to a high point on a hill, we were able to finally, get some footage of what was going on in the rest of the area. Thank you, Anne. Okay, so this is what was going on for me. I apologize for the technical delay there. We were just camping out, basically. So for my kids, it seemed a bit like an adventure, but we had no idea of what was going on anywhere else within 10 minutes away from us. It was, there were trees down everywhere. No one could get anywhere. The trees fell down like matchsticks. And so next slide, we were just basically cooking. And then once we did get out and drive around, this used to be an Airstream park. This is along the river, just a few minutes from my house. It was completely wiped out. Everything, the Airstreams were moved to a different place, but all of the campsites that had just been made, it just started maybe 3 or 4 months earlier. So whoever invested in this project, really had a lot just wiped out. Next slide. And this is one of the first things that we saw, was just that there was a lot of flooding in certain areas. As the storm was coming in, this was actually previous, as the storm was coming in, that there were parts of the town that were flooding that had never flooded before. Next slide. And this is the type of thing that we started seeing once we started getting social media. And I did not, venture down there and see this in person, but this is what people were sharing. Next slide. And once I was able to get out, this was probably about 6 days after the hurricane, I went down to downtown Asheville, which is okay. There are areas of Asheville that are higher up, which are totally fine. And they were serving, this is World Central Kitchen that was serving out of Bear's Smokehouse. And it was, they're serving, I found out, 5,000 people on the first day, but it grew to 30,000 people a day. Next slide. And this is just an image of what they're, the community coming together and serving at Bear's Smokehouse. Next slide. And they were serving, all kinds of people were volunteering. It was just beautiful. Next. There were also people offering their services to clear the trees. The very first thing that we'll get into what was needed, but the very first thing that occurred to everybody that was needed was gas and a gas-powered chainsaw, because you could not get out, you could not get water, you could not get food, you could not get gas unless you could get out of your driveway. And so these were people saying that they would help people. Next. And then I drove down to Riverside Arts District, and it was devastating. It was like Beirut that had been hit by a garbage plant. There was just garbage everywhere. Next, all along the roads, in the trees. And then the River Arts District is an area where there's these old factories that have been converted into breweries and art studios, and they were completely demolished. The water had gone up hundreds of feet outside of the river and up to 26 feet higher than the riverbank. Next slide. And you can see the pallets in the trees, look, they're like 10 feet above those people, hanging in the trees. It completely demolished all of the buildings down there, the insides. They swept out, brewery containers that, I'm sorry, what do you call them? The things that make beer, the distilleries, they were laying all over the place. Next. And this is my favorite place, the Marquee, which is a huge warehouse that has had millions of dollars of art from over 200 artists. People come from around the world to Asheville because there's more artists in the Riverside Arts District than there is pretty much anywhere in the country. And so there's beautiful art, antiques, vintage clothing, like all kinds of jewelry, everything in this Marquee, and it was completely demolished. So it was a very, very sad experience. I did volunteer there, but I couldn't do it for very long because the mud was so toxic, and we will talk about that. You could smell the chemicals, and it gave me a headache. When I volunteered on the second floor of one of these buildings, next slide, you can see in this building, see the second floor, those windows up on the top, the 3 feet of the second floor was flooded. So the bottom 3 feet of the second floor, that must have been at least 26, 28 feet up. And so when we were cleaning up the artist supplies there, one of the artists, I had to pick up books of his art that were maybe 40 years old, his drawings, his art, everything destroyed, covered in mold. and mud, and thousands and thousands of dollars of art books and materials, and um, it was devastating. But he was a doctor. He was a physician. Well, he was a physician's assistant, and all of the other nurses and physician's assistants that he worked with came to help. So there were a lot of people that were coming together to help him clean out his art studio. And there were people from, all across the country, of course, that came in to help. Next slide. And this is an example of just one of them I saw along the road. It was a guy with a Jeep who had cut his truck in half and hauled his truck and filled it with supplies. And it was just a beautiful reminder of the ingenuity and the commitment of the mountain folk. They're extremely ingenious, generous, dedicated, and committed to supporting us in this area. We just had people from West Virginia, miners from West Virginia that came. I'm sorry, I don't have the slide up right now or the image right now, but there were miners from West Virginia that repaved the road in Chimney Rock, and they just completed that a few days ago. They came and did something that FEMA workers and the government said probably would have cost millions of dollars. And so they just did it for free. They just took their time and energy and their excavators. And so people all across the country have come in and brought water, supplies, hay. We've had thousands of bales of hay brought in from other states for people that have animals here, and which is very common in Western North Carolina. I myself, we have goats, and we were able to get some hay. And people brought us propane. People brought us, chainsaws and helped us on our property. And so we're so grateful. Yes, thank you to the people who helped. And and I want to point out that there's been a lot of, I know this is sort of a different issue, but there's been a lot of negative conversations about men in general, and like toxic masculinity and all that kind of thing. But what I saw in this instance was men stepping up. 99.9% of the people that were fixing the power lines, the waterways, the roads, the toxic mud, bringing supplies in, were men. And so I just like to take a moment to acknowledge the men that are pulling our communities together and supporting us. And so that was wonderful. Next slide. And then this is just an image of a rose bush at the Riverside Arts District that I found inspiring. It's still bloomed, even though it's covered in mud. And that concludes my images that I have locally for my experience here locally. What I wanted to say in addition to these photos is, and I'm sorry, folks, I'm not feeling well, so I'm a little bit off my game today. But what I noticed was that the very first instant when this disaster hit, and we started to realize the extensive, the expansive damage that had happened. Over 25 areas in North Carolina are considered emergency zones. Some will not have power for 5 months, is what I just heard from a lineman yesterday. And downtown Asheville didn't have water for, I think it was 3 or 4 weeks. And the water there is still pretty toxic. So, but what I realized was that as soon as we realized that we were okay, so as soon as I realized that I was okay and my family was okay, this happened across the board. The very next thing was, is my neighbor okay? And when we went out in the streets and had eye contact, we made eye contact with everybody, people up on the hill trying to get cell phone service, people trying to get gas. Everybody was asking everybody, are you okay? Is your family okay? Do you need anything? And that wasn't the case before. Before this, I had 2 neighbors that hate each other so much, they would call the cops on each other. They would scream at each other every time they saw each other. But during this incident, one of them was out of town. He had to ask the other one to help him with his dog, and he did. And then there was another woman that's a neighbor of mine that when she learned my political views, she no longer wanted to have anything to do with me. But after the hurricane, she asked me, are you okay? Would you like some water? Would you like some food? So I just would like to remind people that I think you may feel traumatized and deeply disturbed and concerned about the future of our country because of many reasons, one of them being the increase of natural disasters. But what I would like to offer you is that you can have hope and faith in the fact that the human beings around you will most likely react just like they did here in the Appalachian Mountains, which is, are you okay? We will take care of each other. And that's one thing that I learned from my son, who's a survival expert, is that the 5 things that you need for survival are air, water, shelter, food, and then the last one is hope. And because of this experience, I actually have hope that human beings will support each other and take care of each other, and we will find a way. And that is what have experienced here. Now, next, I just want to address that there was some very good conversation after this event. Courageous Discourse had James Patrick on, who James Patrick is an award-winning filmmaker that made the movie Uwe Mon Period and Planet Lockdown, and Nitrogen, about the farmers, and also a film about anyway, many different films. And in that piece, he addressed the fact that there was a huge amount of mistrust that happened after this event. And that was reasonable. There was a lack of support from FEMA, and there was a lot of people who were extremely upset about what was happening in their areas. And he had a very good explanation, so I recommend it if you want to watch it, about what went on in Chimney Rock. And the fact was that the government wasn't trying to do a land grab. They were simply saying that this road that used to be a road was now a river. So it had to be rezoned, right? They had to move the road. And so they weren't trying to take people's land. They were simply trying to rezone so that they could have a new road there. But people took it to mean that they were doing a land grab, and there was hysteria, which is understandable when you've just lost everything, that there would be some hysteria, right? So I would just invite people to consider that sometimes when something very disturbing and chaotic happens, there's an automatic assumption of nefarious intent. And it's not always the case. Sometimes people are just incompetent or not wise or not, aware of what should happen. And sometimes people get a little like homeowners association, edgy, like rules, like we have to be a stickler to the rules and not let 12 helicopters fly over a mountain at the same time. Do you know what I mean? We have to stop some helicopters from going into rescuing people because we need helicopters to not fly into each other. So I just like people to, consider that everybody's doing, I don't want to say just everybody's doing the best they can, because FEMA definitely could have done better. Our government, it was shameful how they responded with $160 billion going to the Ukraine. And, at first they said, oh, we'll send $2 million to us. It's ridiculous. We've got $56 billion worth of damage here in just in this area. So they definitely could have done better, but it was not my experience that FEMA was trying to thwart everybody, that it was totally bad. But it was my experience that the locals did do a far better job than the government, and we should not be waiting for the government to save us. So with that said, I would like to address, okay, I don't have my images up here. I'd like to address the importance of the water situation. And that is reflected in a Common Dreams article about the remainder of the concerns raised about toxic exposure in the aftermath of Helene floodwaters. And what is known is that there are heavy metals, pesticides, chemicals from the sewage plants, from plastic companies. There are very toxic waters that are making the dogs, the search dogs, sick and killing them, eating away the boots of the people who are cleaning up and the gloves. And in that article, let's see, I'm sorry, I don't have mine. There was a mention that after that what they often see after the fact of an emergency is thousands of deaths because of the exposure of chemicals in the water. So I'd like to now address with Dr. Michelle Perro, what can we do after the fact of a hurricane, of extreme weather like this? What can we do with the toxicity of the water? Can we please address what we're being told here now in Asheville is to boil the water for 1 minute? I have deep concerns about that being enough. Can you please address that?
Certainly. Thank you, Zen, for reviewing your personal experience. And I'm not going to talk about creating a home medical kit, which we'll do at the end of the show. I just want to talk about this water issue. If there's no clean water, game over. So the two main issues regarding water are infectious contamination and chemical contamination. That's what you just mentioned, Zen. The boiling will only address infectious contamination with bacteria, viruses, and parasites. If you live below 5,000 feet, you do need to boil the water for a minute. If you're above 5,000 feet in the mountains, which did not affect this community, it's 3 minutes of boiling. But if there's heavy contamination from infectious agents because of the septic systems that were decimated, I looked this up, Zen and Steph, and there are over 300,000, much greater than 300,000 septic systems in that part of Western North Carolina. And if those systems got contaminated, right, from this massive water, but I don't know how many, you can imagine the contamination of the water, because there's also about over 300,000 people on wells. And so I still hear that their recommendation is still to boil the water to remove the chemical toxicants, which you referred to already, the metals, the pesticides, the plastics. You need some filter systems. The most simplest one, believe it or not, are the coffee, non-chlorinated coffee filters can take out some of the debris. Boiling will also take out some microplastics, by the way. Boiling. So you can use these coffee filters to take out some of the debris, and then you do need some kind of carbon-based filter to move the chemical toxicants. Boiling water will not remove them, unfortunately. So you need a 2-level system of boiling and filtration to remove the chemicals and infectious contaminants. So I'll stop there and go to the medical kit later after we hear from Stephanie on her piece of the presentation today.
Okay, great. Yes, we will be covering things that were needed, things that I noticed that were needed right away after extreme weather. But a lot of people are wondering, why did this happen? Why did the 41 trillion gallons of rain drop us? I mean, this is just, it's so rare that something like this would happen so far away from the coast. People it's understandable that they would have suspicions about that with, geoengineering and all of that, and the, land grabs and lithium mines and all that. I understand that there would be suspicion around that. I would like to see further evidence about that if we're going to be addressing that. So I'm not going to address that right now. But we do have, Dr. Stephanie Seneff has a theory, a possible cause about why the hurricane was so ferocious, really very, very extreme. They're talking now about thousands of years that something like this has happened in this area. And yet the hurricanes, it seems, around the world are picking up, not just here, in many, many areas, especially in the Gulf of Mexico. So Stephanie, can you please share with us, what is your theory, your possible cause, this is groundbreaking, on why the hurricanes are getting stronger?
Thank you, Zen. Yes, I have wondered. I only recently discovered something very important about glyphosate. Of course, you can imagine I might think of glyphosate because I feel like it is causing so many more things than we realize. We keep thinking glyphosate is safe, and I keep finding ways in which it's not safe. And certainly with respect to the microbes, we know the microbes in the gut are being destroyed by glyphosate. The same thing is happening in the rivers. And of course, the Mississippi River brings down tons and tons of glyphosate into the Gulf of Mexico. And I think that has a sufficiently big impact that it could be a major player in this, and what we've been noticing of severe weather showing up coming out of the Gulf of Mexico.
Can we show the image of the glyphosate map and then also the Gulf of Mexico?
Yeah, so maybe I could just kind of move through these slides. It might
okay, you have a certain order. No problem. Sorry about
that. It's okay. It's coming.
Okay.
It's coming in a moment.
Okay.
So just looking at Hurricane Beryl, which was before Hurricane Helene, and they were talking about record warm temperatures in the Gulf of Mexico. That's what we've been seeing lately. And so this was in July of 2024, and the quote from this article about record warm temperatures in the Gulf of Mexico, the average daily sea surface temperature for the month of May hit a new all-time high of almost 70 degrees Fahrenheit, setting a monthly new record for the 14th month in a row. So the temperature was going up and up and up beyond every month. It was still hitting a record. And then next slide. This is the glyphosate map that Zen had mentioned, and you can see these levels of glyphosate usage across the country. And this is from 2019. And you can see all this glyphosate in the Midwest, and this is the Mississippi River right here. Tons and tons of glyphosate is used around the Mississippi and also its feeder rivers. And all that glyphosate comes down and lands in the Gulf of Mexico at New Orleans.
I just want to be clear. We're talking about the orange is 1,500 pounds per square mile of glyphosate. That is a lot of glyphosate, folks.
Thank you, Jen. Good point. And you can see that's all concentrated around the Mississippi River. And of course, New Orleans has high rates of cancer, which I suspect is also connected to the glyphosate exposure they are receiving from all that glyphosate coming down the river. So then the next slide, I think, shows the dead zone. Mm-hmm. So there you go. And so there's this big dead zone outside of the Mississippi River where nothing can live. And it's very interesting how that happens. And they have theories about it. And they talk about it's a surprise because it's excess nutrients is what's causing the dead zone, they believe. And so this is nitrogen and phosphorus fertilizers. Glyphosate disrupts the ability of the plants to take up the nitrogen, and that means there's more nitrogen runoff. So you're getting more nitrogen runoff coming into this dead zone. But not only that, glyphosate is actually a nutrient. It's a very good source of both. It has both a nitrogen atom and a phosphorus atom. And so if something can break it down, it becomes nitrogen and phosphorus, and that becomes excess nutrients. And so glyphosate itself is part of the problem, that when the glyphosate gets broken down by cyanobacteria that live in those shallow seas, then the nitrogen and phosphorus become available, and that causes an overgrowth of algae, and the algae consume all the oxygen, and then the fish can't live because there's no oxygen. So that's how you're creating the dead zone. I think glyphosate's a major player, both in terms of more nitrogen runoff that's being used as fertilizer and itself providing nitrogen and phosphorus fertilizers. And then we can go on to the next slide. So this is just showing the temperatures across the temperatures of the waters in the Gulf of Mexico several years, and this is over the course of the year. So the temperatures rise, of course, over the summer. And this was in August of 2024. Tremendous, beat all the records of all the previous years. All these other lines are sort of records of the previous years. And August 22 of 2024 was when the Gulf of Mexico hit this incredibly high temperature at that time. And high temperature in the Gulf of Mexico is a huge problem because that's what drives hurricanes. That's how you get extreme weather. So the problem is the Gulf of Mexico is much hotter than it has ever been before. And then you get this, and the temperature gradient between the Gulf of Mexico and the Atlantic Ocean drives these high winds and creates these situations where you get these storms. And so now I think we have the next slide. So this is what I was really surprised by. Another aspect of glyphosate that I suspect may be very, very important. And there's this molecule, it's a gas called dimethyl sulfide. It's a simple molecule. It's a small sulfur-containing gas. And it turns out it plays an important role in climate change. And so what's interesting is that it decreases the amount of solar radiation that reaches the Earth's surface by inducing clouds. So it's a seed of clouds. It makes clouds. And if you think about dimethyl sulfide being produced by these microbes that live in the shallow seas all around the Gulf of Mexico, and particularly coming out of that river, the Mississippi River, the microbes that live there produce dimethyl sulfide, which seeds the clouds, which keeps the cloud cover over the ocean and keeps it from getting too hot. I think that may be crucial, that there's too many sunny days that are causing it to get heated up to the point where you get this crisis situation that then triggers these massive winds and then massive rain coming out of the sky. So it's synthesized from this other molecule called dimethyl sulfonopropionate, a big word, DMSP. And this particular microbe, Emiliania huxley, E. huxley, it's an important marine phytoplankton species that synthesizes this DMS. And so we can go to the next slide. And so this is what I was really impressed to find this article about glyphosate, differential growth responses of marine phytoplankton to the herbicide glyphosate, and a very detailed and technical article. And in particular, they looked at this particular microbe, E. huxley, which is the one that makes that dimethyl sulfide. And then they showed that it's extremely sensitive to glyphosate. And so this is a plot over time of the exposure. So you have the white is the control, and then there's a low level of glyphosate, and then a high level of glyphosate is the third column. And you can see that the control is growing over time. Significant drop in the amount with the low level of glyphosate, but the high level of glyphosate completely wipes it out. You only get a little bit of it here at 14 days. So it's very sensitive to glyphosate. It's being hurt by the glyphosate, probably also hurt by the sort of hypoxic situation and everything else that's going on there that's not normal, to the point where this microbe is underperforming. And then you're not getting enough clouds, you're getting too much heat, and then you get to this situation of these massive storms. So that's all I wanted to say.
So are you saying that the glyphosate reduces the life in the ocean, and then when that life is reduced, there's algae and other gases that increase the temperature of the water, and then the water temperature then increases the velocity of the hurricane because of the temperature increase, like it makes it stronger and bigger. Is that what you're saying?
Almost right. Just the gases actually decrease the temperature because this dimethyl sulfide is a magical gas that actually seeds the clouds, and that's what's missing. I mean, it's also the dead zone. There's no life, but they're especially sensitive to glyphosate, and they're getting clobbered. They're not making enough of that dimethyl sulfide, and that's causing too many sunny days, and that's heating up the ocean, and then you get the whole thing that follows.
I see. Too many sunny days. Okay, which then heat up the ocean, which then adds to when there is a hurricane, it makes it hotter.
The fact that it's hotter drives the hurricane to make the hurricane more powerful.
I see what you're saying. Okay. Yeah, and I do remember seeing a meteorologist. He actually was brought to tears when it was going viral, when he was reporting the temperature of the hurricane in the Gulf of Mexico, how hot it was. He was shocked at the temperature of how hot the water was and how hot the hurricane was, and he was actually brought to tears because he knew it was going to be extremely impactful. And so that was one of the reasons why there were so many work crews down in Florida. It took so long for work crews to get up to Asheville because they were all down in Florida. They were expecting massive devastation in Florida. And there was a lot of damage there. You know, we had volunteers that weren't able to come to our recent conference because their home was damaged, but they didn't expect for it to pick up and to continue and be so strong in Asheville. So we have, so that is.
And I would just add that the temperature across the board, across the entire oceans is too high. And that's part of what's killing off the coral reefs. So we've got a really big problem. The water, actually, oceans can soak up some of that extra heat in the air, but they have a limit to the amount that they can do that. And they're being heated up because of this climate crisis that we're facing right now. And I just think glyphosate also disrupts the ability of the plants to take up carbon and capture it in the soil because it affects enzymes that are involved with photosynthesis. So that's another factor to consider globally, that wherever there's glyphosate, there's less ability to pull carbon dioxide out of the air, which is causing too much carbon dioxide in the air, which is part of the whole driving of the climate change problem.
You know, Stephanie, we can talk about that when we talk about bioremediation. That's one point. And so to have conversations about climate change without talking about regenerative organic soil conservation is inaccurate. It's just faulty. So to really, if I hear one more word about climate change without talking about regenerating our soil, we also know that regenerative organic agriculture heals the water cycle. And we know that when there is organic regenerated soil can absorb more water than soil that has been decimated by chemical inputs. So a conversation about climate change must include about a conversation about moving away from chemical agriculture, like immediately.
Absolutely. And that would
totally agree.
Yeah, that would be regenerative organic agriculture. And that would mean that there would be cover crops used, and which increase the microbe nutrient density in the soil, which increases water absorption by hundreds of fold. They can absorb much more water, so that would mean when there is flooding, that the soil is absorbing more water, and also it would sequester. There is more carbon sequestration happening in regenerative organic agriculture. And in addition to, better, the waterways and just the irrigation structure, all of that is managed better with regenerative organic agriculture. So I don't know if we have more slides about that, or if, Michelle, do you want to talk more about that? Let me see.
Well, yeah, I mean, we can, this is a solutions based. So, we're so good at the doom and gloom, but
we can get into that. Let's get into the solutions here.
Well, maybe we should just, since we're talking about bioremediation, maybe we could just mention it. And I don't know if our producer, Ann Temple, can find that lovely slide. Oh, and she did. Thank you, Ann.
Thank you.
So how did we stumble on this? I wasn't born knowing this information. I don't think Zen and Stephanie were either, but we found it when we were talking about the toxic metals study we did in infant formula and how we can clean up infant formulas, as you may recall in our previous episodes. But this is one of the ways we do it, is by this process of bioremediation. And here we are, scientists, moms, physicians, talking about how to remediate the soil. Well, this is how you do it. And I indeed am not an expert in this, but I certainly can read about it. And if anyone, our organic regen farmers like Mark Dula and Howard Vlieger and Don Huber and so many, Ray Archuleta and Gay Brown, there are so many of them know how to do this. So I won't go into all these techniques, but through utilizing plants to absorb toxicants, you can remediate soil. You can do it through microbes, because microbes such as fungi, they're all not bad. And we could talk about mold in a second, could break down some of these toxicants. You can augment the soil where you introduce certain microbes. Composting is a great way to remediate soil. And there's something called phytostabilization. You plant vegetation to immobilize heavy metals of the soil, and then to prevent migration to other areas. So Zen mentioned already cover cropping. We talk about no-tillage farming. We talk about planting companions. We talk about agroforestry and using forests. There are so many ways that we can improve our soils, not to mention you need increased nutrients in our soil for our food supply. And over the past, I'd say 50 years, the nutrient density of our food's gone down 40%. And a lot has to do with the soil, much of it, and the water. Clean water also is a great source of cleansing as well. And water is filled with minerals. Good water is a mineral-rich source. Don't forget water, because it seems like this is a water-focused show. So I just wanted to bring in that piece of the conversation.
Yeah, and it's not without, we definitely notice the irony here that companies like Monsanto, Bayer, Dow, DuPont, are now touting, they're talking about regenerative agriculture. They're not talking about regenerative organic agriculture, though. They're simply saying plant more cover crops and then spray those cover crops like chickpeas with glyphosate. So they're just using this regenerative catchword to sell more glyphosate, which then, according to Stephanie Seneff's theory, is that the glyphosate runs off into the water, creates a temperature problem in the water, which then contributes to more ferocious hurricanes. And that, to me, makes sense. That makes sense that what happens in the soil is impacting what's happening in the water, because there is runoff. That is a fact. And then what's happening in the water does affect the cloud formation, the temperatures, the hurricane, the types of hurricanes. And then that of course impacts us when it hits, the windfall, when it hits the land. And so this is something, once again, we can say thanks most likely to Monsanto / Bayer and DuPont for contributing to what's going on in the planet. They keep trying to say they're going to solve the problems, but they're actually the ones causing the problems. And we need, again, this is another reason why we need to switch to regenerative organic agriculture. And we need all of us to support purchasing regenerative organic. The good news is that we have a call from one of our senators, Cory Booker, for the Safe School Meals Act. I don't have an image right now, but you will put the link in the comments. And Beyond Pesticides has put together a great petition for all of you to tell your senators and representatives to please support the Safe School Meals Act, which we're really thrilled about, because it provides support for regenerative organic farmers to get regenerative organic food into schools, which would have low to no pesticides, heavy metals, food dyes, PFAS, and phthalates. That, of course, would be wonderful for our children, for the future of our country, and also for the soils, which could in turn, if Stephanie's theory is correct, prevent extreme weather, could contribute to reducing extreme weather. So this is a solution that's all across the board, a beneficial solution. So we hope that you will contact your senators and representatives and tell them to support regenerative organic agriculture and the Safe School Meals Act. So that's one of the solutions that, as a call to action, that you can do. We'd also like to get into what you can do to be prepared for extreme weather. Michelle will talk about the medical kit, but I just wanted to share From my personal experience, as I mentioned before, number one is to have gas, have like containers of gas. You can't have them for too long though, because it kind of goes bad. Gas, it won't only last for a couple of months. So you'd have to switch that out every couple of months. Have a gas powered chainsaw, have a hand crank solar radio, because one of the first things that you want to do is be able to know what's happening in your community. And that really reduces your anxiety and supports you in knowing where you can go for help and where supplies are. So have a hand crank radio, and then also have propane tanks for your generator. Everybody has to have a generator, and that will help your refrigerator keep your food, which may be hundreds of dollars worth of food, viable to be able to consume. You should have, addition to canned food, you should have a manual can opener. A lot of people don't have that. That's very important for getting your canned food open, and a way to cook your food, like a camp stove. We happen to have a campfire, but most places people don't have a campfire. So please have a camp stove and those small bottles of propane. And Karen's saying buy gas with no ethanol because it will last. Thank you so much, Karen, for that point. Yeah, that's a little bit harder to find in some places. And then having candles and flashlights, of course, very important. In addition to life straws, water filters, if in extreme cases you need to be able to drink water out of, containers that you are questionable, but you can get water out of your hot water heater. That is something that a lot of people forget about. And also you should definitely fill up your bathtub before a hurricane, because then you can just take a kitchen pot and take that water from your bathtub and pour it in the front of your toilet, not in the back of your toilet, because you'll be able to flush with less water if you pour that water into the front of your toilet. You can also use your car battery to hook up to your generator to keep your refrigerator going. That's a good old boy trick that one of my friends' sons' dads did. And so that's something that a lot of people don't think about. And I'll see if I think of any other of the things that were needed, but definitely gas. Oh, and 2 weeks worth of water. If you ever get a neighborhood crime watch program in your neighborhood, the police will come by and inform you on what you need. And one of the first things they say is that everyone, no matter whether you're a suburban area or rural area, everyone should have 2 weeks worth of water on hand at all time, because FEMA will not come out for 2 weeks, is what I was warned in Southern California. And that was pretty much the case here in the Carolinas. People expected to have FEMA here within a couple of days, and they were not. They just don't mobilize that fast, or they go to schools and hospitals first. They don't go out to, individual residences. So having 2 weeks worth of water is very important. And Stephanie, you're going to talk about medical kits as well, right?
Michelle. Well, Stephanie could
sorry,
probably.
Michelle. Yes, Michelle. Sorry. Yes.
Well, Stephanie could probably give this talk as well, because, gosh, we do all this all the time. So we could share my screen, and please, and there's a little medical kit. And prevention is better than cure. And I think this is a reminder, no matter what type of disaster that strikes us, everyone needs a home medical kit. I put this one together for you guys based on flooding. And Zen made so many good points. And one other thing that we've done here in our neighborhood in Northern California, because we are prone to fires here, well, storms too, but certainly fires. We met as a neighborhood in our driveway, and we all shared information on our phones, our emails, where our valve shutoffs were. We all have various.
Can you say why, Michelle? Why would you share where your valve shutoffs were? What do you mean by that?
If there's a fire, you might want to shut off your gas line so your house doesn't explode.
Yeah, that might be a good idea.
So we know where our shutoff valves are, because we still have gas stoves, and I love my gas stove. I don't think I want to go electric, because when the power goes out, we can still cook. So I'm a big fan of the gas stove. This is something we did as a neighborhood. I couldn't stress it enough. And even having our contacts, hopefully you have access to your cell phone. If you don't, you can use satellite phones. There are different systems you can have. Maybe not every house needs ones, but having a few satellite phones, and you can still communicate with people if your cell goes out. There are some of us in our area who've maintained our landlines. I'm not giving up mine, because in a storm, I can still use my landline when my power goes out. And we in California, I don't think we've been without power out as long as the folks in Western North Carolina. Oh my gosh, that's a long time. We've been out a week or two, and that's a long time, because you lose all your food. So we all smartened up and got generators as well. So a couple of things about this medical kit, and I won't beat you up on it, but a few things. The kit has to be grab and go. It has to be ready to go. It should be waterproof. We're talking about hurricanes now. I love the waist belt. You can put it around your waist and your hands are free. You don't have to carry something, especially if you're moving quickly. Now, that water storage that Zen was referring to in your garage, in your home, that's hard to carry around in water if you're heading out. So you have to have things with you that can decontaminate your water. So iodine is your friend. I like the 2% tincture. You can read how to do this. You can take a screenshot. It's up on the website, GMO Science, and we can clean water. Iodine will kill everything. During COVID, we were making solutions of this, putting it on nose and spraying in our throats. Yes, it's also great for strep throat. And there's how you do it. When water is cold, you have to let it sit longer. Iodine takes longer to work, and iodine will bump out that toxic fluoride your kids may have gotten from the dentist or in their water supply, just saying. Okay, boil water, we covered. Coffee filters, we covered. I want to say a couple of words about stress. Because no doubt, when you're in the survival mode, the whole family, including the dog, is going to be stressed out. So there is a homeopathic remedy. You may not all become experts in homeopathy, but this is one remedy you want to have on hand, aconitum. They come in little potencies, 30C. I'll be doing a talk on this on my website shortly, but you just can suck on the little sugar pills. They're safe for the dog. They're safe for grandma. Everyone could take some aconitum. There's something called rescue remedy. My sister's cats are fighting. I put some in their water. Anyway, it's good for when people are stressed out, and you can put it in water under the tongue. It comes out as spray. They come in sugar pellets, and the kids will take them as well. And breathing is what Zen said. Michelle, can you mention breathing? Let's talk about breathing, because what if you don't have these things? You don't have aconitum. You don't have rescue remedy. You can breathe. As according to Zen's son, the number one thing in a survival situation is you need oxygen, even before water.
Yeah.
A couple of minutes, no oxygen. Well, we're not talking about oxygen, but I'm talking about if you learn a certain simple breathing technique, it will reduce your stress. And I wrote here how to do it. And what it does is it increases something called your parasympathetic tone. Your nervous system is in balance between sympathetic, which is go, 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 and parasympathetic is rest and digest. So they want to be in balance. And when we're all stressed out, trying to get out of these awful situations, even when the immediate danger is gone, we could still be stressed out because we as adults caring for our families know that the danger may not be really over yet, as we're dealing with contaminated water and trying to get our food supply and all this stuff, and our boots getting eaten up by chemical toxins. So,
Well, and Michelle, there's also the trauma of what's happening around us in our communities and people not feeling like they can help. I was shocked that my body reacted in such a way that I had to sleep for 14 hours a day, a couple days. I was just out. It was like I had mono. I was so fatigued and overwhelmed and distraught and sad. And I have to say guilty, feeling guilty that, a town 10 minutes away from me was completely demolished. And, and I'm thinking about people stuck in the mountains, people that, their family loved ones died, people that saw their loved ones die right before their eyes, people that had nothing, they didn't have a home and I had a home, so there's survival's guilt and there's fatigue and all those types of experiences and also I've heard from people all across the country, hundreds of people. I was so kind that, people were asking if I was okay, but they were also expressing that they were feeling grief and trauma, even as far as, California or Colorado, because they wanted to help and they didn't know what they could do. They were seeing, they were inundated by the images on social media of the trauma and of the catastrophe. And then also, I believe it sparked trauma from people who experienced 9/11. I personally I wasn't there, but, it was very close to my heart. I used to live in New York. And then also Standing Rock, it was like a war zone. And we were, exposed to so much trauma there. So people could be triggered from this event and from seeing images on social media, which I have to say, I'm getting a little bit, stressed out about and needing to avoid at some times, because there are some posts that are so heartbreaking that afterwards my nervous system is shut down for hours. I mean, I'm crying for an hour, and it's so impactful. So is that the breathing that you're talking about? Is that something that people can do when they're experiencing trauma?
yes,
that.
So, of course, and these are short-term things as we correct the situation, but these breathing techniques will work. When you exhale and the exhalation is longer than your inhalation, it activates this calming part of your nervous system, the parasympathetic nervous system. And these two have to be in balance. Now, we're not going to go sitting around doing yoga in the middle of a crisis. Come on, let's have a little bit of a modicum of common sense. But once the initial phase is over, we have to take a minute to protect ourselves, because when you're the captain of the ship, it's really hard to go down. You need, especially when you have children and pets and everyone is relying on you. I used to do these trips to Central America, to Nicaragua, Honduras, and Mexico. I used to be in rural areas, and I was the lead physician. And I knew I couldn't go down because otherwise the whole ship was going down. And I want to say one more thing, that one thing I learned during these trips that I used to do, these medical missions, and seeing when I would go into these super rural communities where people were short on formal education, but not practical knowledge. When I was in a rural part of Mexico, every family had chloroquine in there in case they came down with malaria. In addition, what every family had was something I found that I brought back with me from, I think, sorry, no problem, Honduras. I was in San Pedro Sula, Honduras, in a very rural area, and were these something called carbotural. These are carbon tabs that you swallow that are great for detoxification from infection and toxic exposures. Every family had these. They're super cheap, super affordable. Every family had them. And so let's say you are exposed to these toxic things that people who are doing cleanup are exposed to. Some kind of binder would be excellent for them to take. I didn't include it in my medical kit because we're talking second tier issues now, and I didn't want to get too complicated here. But having something like these carbon capsules, you can buy them for $20 for 100 caps. Organic is preferable, please. Organic caps without other added caca to the carbon. And you take it a half hour before you eat, or a medication, or 2 hours later, because they bind up everything. So if your gut is disturbed from some of the water you're drinking in these areas, try these carbon capsules. You can open a capsule and put it in something for a small child, some juice or something if you have to. And they can drink that, and it will bind up infectious and toxic exposures. So just a few more things. I won't go through everything here, but you want to prepare for wounds. Resilience is key. Zen did a beautiful job talking about in a crisis situation, we have to come together as communities. I'm a pediatric emergency physician by training, so I'm well versed in this kind of frontline management. And I've been on the front line when my first businesses was doing this. But anyway, if you say, wait, if I buy all this stuff, I'm going to have extra gauzes and Band-Aids. Well, you buy it and make up different kits for different family members or your community. You all chip in. You don't need one box of Band-Aids for one person. You can distribute them in different kits. And this way you can make these kits as a community. And I put my favorite little tools in there. Don't forget pain. I love homeopathic arnica. It was misquoted in an article today being called a vitamin. Arnica is not a vitamin. It's a homeopathic remedy made from a plant. And it's really great for sprains and strains. And of course, you might want to have some ibuprofen. It's a good pain reliever with you, liquid or gel tabs for the kids.
I was told when I had a baby that it was an Appalachian remedy. Arnica was from the Appalachian Mountains.
Actually, it is. It's from a flower that is grown there. It's I think wolfbane is the name of the flower, but it's a little white, beautiful flower. And remember, what you may not know, homeopathics are diluted in a mother tincture. Mm-hmm. And then we take a drop of that and dilute it so many times, 999 times via dilution and succussion is where we shake it. Not actually shaking, you hit it. And it's a process where these remedies no longer have the material in them, just the energy of whatever we're trying to give. So this arnica is magic. You can have it, comes in salves and gels and ointments. You can put it topically on closed wounds, not open wounds.
It works. Just use it after you've gotten a bruise, and you'll notice your bruise clears up right away. It helps with healing.
Next day. This is now in the Western literature. Surgeons use arnica. So this is one of the homeopathic remedies that has crossed over into mainstream medicine.
Mhm.
And I have lots of citations on that. And I just threw a last few things, space blankets. I gave money during Helene to people who were getting people heaters. It got really cold in Western North Carolina. So I contributed to sending heaters there. Table salt, like Celtic sea salt or real salt, is really good for making oral rehydration solutions in case someone has vomiting and diarrhea, and or brushing your teeth with a little bit of aluminum-free baking soda. Baking soda and salt, I like to put in the kits. And last but not least is vitamin C. When you are stressed out from either emotional stress, infectious stress, toxic load stress, fighting with your spouse stress, or whatever stress it is, vitamin C is a great antioxidant that can offset the stress. Remember, we squeeze a little bit of lemon juice on an apple to prevent it from going brown. That's vitamin C at work.
Mhm.
That's from vitamin C. It's an amazing vitamin. And so if you can get some sunshine in there too, I know Stephanie loves sunshine, so do I. Get some vitamin C. And don't forget, you have to dose it depending on the kids, but it comes in powders. And if you don't have access to water, bring the gummies along, fill a sugar, but bring the gummies. So anyway, I think that's just a super quick overview. Take first aid courses if they're given in your community online. Get a little book or pamphlet to throw in your medical bag and have it where everybody knows it, where it exists. If you keep it in your car, remember, if cars get hot, a lot of these things can spoil in a hot car, like plastic in those water plastic bottles that are filled with antimony and other, phthalates and not phthalates, parabens. So I hate plastic water bottles, but I've used them too in emergency situations. So, but we're trying to do the best we can. It's not going to be a perfect world. If there's an emergency, we're just trying to do the best we can and minimizing our own stress levels.
Thank you so much, Michelle. That is a valuable, valuable resource to have on gmoscience.org. I highly recommend everybody take a little time. I personally do a lot of that during the holiday times. When I know there's a day off, I'll take the day after the holiday and, do some household planning or cleaning out. And that's actually what I did during the hurricane when there was no electricity or, media or social media to distract us from. I just cleaned out my bathroom. I cleaned out my closet. I cleaned out my office. And I think that's like a detox that we go through that really can support us for the future. Now, other people had trees that had fallen on their house and much more devastating impacts. But this is something that is important to think about: is when a chaotic event happens, focus what's on right in front of you first. And this is why the social media images really did impact a lot of people, because they were seeing images that they couldn't do anything about, so that put them in a state of stress and anxiety when they couldn't do anything about that. But if you still want to do something about this issue here in Asheville, North Carolina, Samaritan's Purse is a great place to donate to. Beloved Asheville, Cajun Navy, and there are many more. I'm sure if you can comment in this comment section. World Central Kitchen. There were local churches, and that was one thing that we noticed, is that the local churches really stepped up and provided food. So please also know that if an extreme weather situation happens, you cannot assume that people will just come to you. You have to ask. You have to find a way to communicate. You have to reach out, and it's okay to accept help. Right now, we have all kinds of people. There, $24 million was donated during. Thank you to everybody who donated to the Carolina concert. And there are RVs being donated. People without homes are getting into tiny houses. Little tiny houses are being built. So the wonderful thing is that we're seeing an outpouring of support from the communities for these many different areas. But it does behoove you to be prepared and have at least 2 weeks worth of water, have food, have a method to cook that food, have non-potable water to flush your toilets, because that could be a very messy and a bad situation for people, and be prepared and have an area in your closets or your garage where you have these types of supplies. So anything else that either one of you would like to add as we wrap up here?
Well, here are just some examples of books. That first book, Where There Is No Doctor, is in English and Spanish. It was written in 1970. Most communities in Central America have these types of books around, and they can do so much resilience on their own because they often do not have access to any healthcare providers, nurses, midwives, nothing where they live. There is a home doctor book that I kind of like as well, a little more technical, but it has practical medicine for folks to learn at home. And then I will also have some books on my website and for homeopathic solutions as well.
Thank you, Dr. Pero, and thank you, Stephanie Seneff, for your perspective on why these extreme weather conditions might be happening. Another reason to support regenerative organic agriculture. Thank you, everybody of our listeners, Karen and Warrior 1025, and everybody who's contributing. Thank you, Ann, producer. And a special thanks, please donate to gmoscience.org to keep this show going and the very valuable research up on the website. It does take something. We have been through attacks and all of that. Please help us grow at gmoscience.org. Thank you very much, everyone. We'll see you next month on our next show.